really happy to be here, and I'm happy to see all of you. I talked to Sister, and I said, I think the talk I need to give should be the talk that I love to give, called "And Then God Gave Me a Timeout." And I start by asking you a question. Have you ever had a timeout from God? Let me tell you, I've had a few. And they've been somewhat significant, so I thought we'd spend a little bit of time talking about those. But in order to do that, I think it's important to put my life into context. I had this very crazy, busy life, and so if you'll indulge me, I'll tell you a little bit about it. So I was a corporate executive. I was running marketing for companies all over the world. I started with Energizer. I was running marketing for Energizer, and I actually lived in Asia. I'm running marketing for them. And once I did that, all of a sudden, I was known as somebody who could do global marketing. Well, that led to all sorts of activities. All of a sudden, my life was about being on the phone. It was about being in meetings. It was not uncommon that I might wake up at 2 in the morning because I had a conference call to take. My days would start at 6 in the morning. I'd run all day. I'd have all these meetings all day long. I'd go to dinner at the end of the day. I'd get home at 9 so that we could talk with Asia at 9 o'clock, go to bed, and start it all over again. And in the course of all of this, somehow I thought that if I was busy, I must be relevant. If I was busy, I must be important. I thought that if I was busy, perhaps I mattered, right? So I was really busy all the time. But guess what? God needed me to take a time out. And so I had my first time out. I was on the way to Chicago. My aunt had passed away from breast cancer, as it turned out, and so I was going up to the funeral. So I'm up at the funeral. I'm getting ready to leave to go to the funeral. I'm stepping out of the elevator. And as I go to step out of the elevator, I firmly believe I stepped in syrup. We couldn't prove it. So I step out of the elevator, step into something, the rest of me keeps going, and my leg does this. And all of a sudden, I have a broken ankle. I have a torn up knee. I tore all the ligaments in the ankle and in the knee. I had plates put into the ankle. I had pins put into the knee, cadaver tendons to hold it all together. I was in a cast from toe to hip. Now, my life had been all about work. That's all I did, right? From middle of the night all the way through middle of the night. So all I could think about was, I gotta get back to work. Gotta get back to work. So I go to the surgeon and I said, okay, when can I go? 1 week after I had this fall and I'm still in the cast from toe to hip, when can I go back to work? He's like, you need to rest. I said, okay. Went back a week later. Okay, I rested this week, time to go back to work. He looked at me, he goes, you don't get it. You don't get it. You're going to have to make a choice between your leg and your career. I was like, whoa. I hadn't thought about it like that. It hadn't occurred to me that that's what we were dealing with. But the fact of the matter was, it was taking 6 surgeries just to get the leg repaired. He finished by saying, what you don't understand is I can't promise that you will ever walk again. What I can promise is if you don't rest, you will never walk again. Whew. That was timeout number 1. And the thing was, I just didn't know how to deal with that. That's not who I was. That's not what my life was all about. I was used to being so busy. But I found myself sitting. I found myself sitting in my house. And I will say, I know it was my house, but I loved my little house. It was a little Donna house, and it was very well appointed on the inside. It had a nice little garden, right, and a little fountain out there. And I had a screen porch, and I'd love to sit on that screen porch. My parents, they are just angels, just beautiful people, and they were with me so much, even though they live in Ohio, so much. Mom was sitting with me, and I was on the screen porch, and I'm looking out, And I said, Mom, I really have a beautiful garden, don't I? And she looked at me incredulous. She said, don't you know? Don't you know? Mm-mm. I didn't know. Because, I wasn't there. I would leave first thing in the morning, it was dark. I'd be gone all day, come home and it was dark. The gardeners knew. The people who would mow the yard, they knew. I had a fountain guy knew. People who cleaned the house, they knew. The neighbors knew. I didn't know. So something started to happen as I sat. I started to see things that had always been there. I just hadn't noticed them. I learned something really amazing, like I didn't get this, but you can take a nap on a screen porch. Did you know that? It was so cool. I was like, fire up. I can sleep out here. And something happened when I'd sleep out there. I learned something else. Squirrels make noises. I didn't know this, but I never sat quietly to ever hear that. So I'd heard the birds. And one thing that really struck me were all the various shades of green. I really didn't know there were that many shades. So as I'm sitting here, I start realizing that this beauty has always been here. This God-given beauty has been all around me. I just never noticed it. I was too busy to see it. If I had seen it, I hadn't appreciated it. In time, my leg healed. And of course, I went right back to work. Couldn't wait. But I had learned, I knew I had learned, I wouldn't go to work until maybe 8 in the morning. And I would leave by 6. And honestly, if my leg hurt, which it did all the time, I'd put it up and put ice on it. So I had learned. I'd listened to God, and I'd learned to be a little bit quieter, right? I thought God had really taught me so much. I don't think he was done with me yet. We had more timeouts coming. God wasn't done. And we know that because I was on a lot of medications for this ankle that was so sore. And one of the medications in a very rare situation can cause asthma. Well, guess who gets asthma? Because that's how I roll. And the asthma then became pneumonia. So I am coughing and coughing and coughing. And I'm holding my side because I thought it would help. And I feel something. And I think, I really hope this is a broken rib. But you know what I knew? I knew it wasn't a broken rib. So I went back to the doctor the next day because we had to go to the doctor for the pneumonia. And I said, would you take a look at this? And she said, well, let's hope it's a broken rib. I said, we need to have it checked. The mammogram said it wasn't a broken rib. No. And so a few days later, I'm having a biopsy. Now, this is all of about 3 months after I'm off crutches for the leg. So this is happening all so very quickly. Meanwhile, I had still been working. I had gone back to work, right? But I also knew that Monsanto, who I was working with, was struggling a little bit at the time. And I thought, I'm going to have to find another job. I can't do what I used to do. I can't travel. Marketing's the first thing they always get rid of, right? So I start interviewing. So I'm looking for another job at the same time that I'm having a biopsy. Holy cow, what does this look like? And then it happened. I had an interview with Ingersoll Rand one morning to run their global marketing, a multi-billion-dollar company. I'd be running hundreds of millions of dollars of budget, and I'd have a staff of over 300 people. So that was my morning. My sister and my niece were in town visiting, and because I just had a biopsy, wonder why they were there. So they're in town, and we're going to go get a manicure, my niece and I. And I'll never forget, we're sitting in the car, and the phone rings. And I look at the phone, and I think it's the doctor. And I remember saying to myself, you have to say everything you hear out loud. You have to say it out loud so your sister hears it, so you know what has to happen next. Hello? Yes? This is Donna. You have some bad news. Yes, it's unfortunate that it's cancer. Okay, I see. Do you know the type? Do you know the stage? No, you don't know that yet. Okay, so what do I do? Okay, I have to call you in the morning and make an appointment, and we'll figure it out. Yes, I'll call you. Yes, I'll call you. I will, and you have a nice day too. What's up with that? But it's what we do, right? In the midst of what was going on, we just go back to who we are, despite what we had heard. I see my sister and she has tears in her eyes. And I look at my 10-year-old niece and I think, oh, why did she have to hear this? This time out was huge. This time out was stage 3 breast cancer. It was bigger than a tennis ball, so it was bigger than 10 centimeters. There were 6 rounds of chemo. There were, in the end, a double mastectomy. And because there were so many complications, there were actually 6 surgeries. There were 28 radiation treatments. And remember, all of this is less than a year after I've been told that if I don't rest my leg, we may not walk again. So this was my second time out, and it was a really big one. And the thing is, this time out was so significant, and it was significant in many different ways. In one way, I knew how to handle it now. I was going to let the chemo do what the chemo did. I wasn't going to fight it. I was going to let the radiation do what the radiation did. I was really sick, but I was really calm. I was so exceptionally calm with the cancer. Oh, and in case you're wondering, I got the job. Right? I mean, that's how it works, right? Of course I got the job. And all the way through the interview process and thinking about this job, I'm like, this isn't going to work. There's no way this is going to work. There were all these huge boulders. And I see God pushing these boulders out of the way, just one after another. The first one, the company was headquartered in New Jersey. And I'm thinking, I'm going to have to move. Well, I can't move. Can't move to New Jersey. I'm starting chemo treatments here in St. Louis. So I call and I said, now, where would you like the company based, or where would you like me based? And he said, well, we've just, we've acquired another company and it's pretty significant and it's in St. Louis, but we don't have an executive team member there. Would you mind staying in St. Louis? Sure. You know, so there's that boulder. It's a global job, right? There's some 300 people that I'm going to have to manage around the world. I'm supposed to be flying like every day. And so I'm thinking about all this travel. In my first week on the job, in fact, I fly up to Minneapolis. Mind you, I'm 3 months into my chemo, so I have no hair. I'm wearing a wig, got my makeup. They don't know that I have cancer, because we're just not going to talk about that. So I fly up to Minneapolis, we're sitting in meetings, and we get an email from the CFO. We are stopping all travel because the company's not making its budget numbers. And that is a way we're going to control expense. So I'm sitting there with the team going, oh no, this is horrible. I have to meet the staff. And inside I'm going, yes, no travel. Yes, no travel. I was like, really, God? Did you just move that one too? And then I'm going through chemo. I was really sick. I was really so very sick. And I'd go into the office, and it was just yucky, all right, going into the office, and nobody would be there. And I said, nobody's here. Where is everybody? And they said, well, you know, actually, most people work from home. We only really come to the office once a week or so. I'm like, let me get this straight. So I can lay in bed with my phone to my ear and the laptop on my stomach, and you won't know the difference? I didn't tell them that, but that's how I worked. All these boulders, and God's just pushing them away. So I'm seeing this, and I start to see people, much in the way that I started to see flowers before. I started seeing people. This friend of mine from Monsanto, Jennifer, she's just spectacular. She would come over once a week, and she would bring me lunch. And she would do odd jobs. Like one day she cleaned my closets. Are you kidding me? Who does that? You know, she was such a delight. But the best thing we did is we would just sit and talk. And we would talk, and we would talk, and we would talk. And one day she looked at me, and she said, how are you so calm through all of this? We know what you went through with your leg, and now you're going through this cancer, and you might not make it, and we know that. And I looked at her, and when I said it, I think this is when I really understood and believed it. I looked at her and I said real simply, I trust in God. I trust in God. And I said, if God needs me, he'll take me. If he needs me here, I'll be here. Guess he needed me here. And she looked at me and she said, you know, we never talked about faith at work. And we didn't. I mean, last thing you'd ever do is talk about faith in corporate America. Let me just tell you, we don't do that. And she said, but I always thought you were faith-filled. I said, no, what? Why did you think that? And she said, because when most other people will cuss when they're frustrated, I'd hear echoing through the halls of Monsanto, oh, heavens. Oh, Donna's frustrated again. Okay. The thing is, the way I was brought up, you don't talk about faith. It was how you lived your life. We were taught that you don't share it out loud. And what I was learning from Jennifer is that, in fact, there was nothing better than sharing my faith. Now, that didn't mean that I was going to talk about it a lot, trust me. But one-on-one with somebody, absolutely, I just might do that. And in having those conversations, I became so present to Jennifer, to who she was. I wasn't just seeing the flowers. I was seeing these beautiful people. And she wasn't the only beautiful person. There were all these beautiful people. You know, the thing is, they'd been in my life the entire time. I just hadn't necessarily seen them. There was book club. I've gone to book club for 15 years. And Maureen, God bless Maureen. I always think she lives out in Kansas City. She would tell me it's not quite that far. But she would come in from wherever she is. She is a little west. And she'd come in and she'd pick me up and take me wherever book club was and then take me back home and then go on back to her house. And I would say, why are you doing this? This is adding 3 hours to her night. And she's like, you might get yourself there. You're never going to be able to get yourself home. So Maureen, who I've been friends with for years, so beautifully radiant, right there in front of me. So just like the flowers, the people had been there. I just hadn't always seen them. As I went through cancer, I became very frustrated at times. There were a lot of, oh heavens. One of the things that really frustrated me was the lack of everyday information. There's these things that happen to you when you go through cancer and you go through treatments that nobody can prepare you for. Some of them are little things, like you'll lose your eyebrows. Well, but maybe that's not so little. Like, you know you're going to lose your hair, right? I didn't know about eyebrows and eyelashes. I didn't know that I was going to have a bloody nose every time I turned around. That was so unladylike. And that's what I kept saying. Something would happen, I'd say, oh, this is so unladylike. I can't believe this is happening now. A friend introduced me to all sorts of other women who'd gone through cancer. And I would sit with them, and they would each offer one little morsel, one little tip. And those tips were so helpful. And I remember saying to my friend, I don't have the energy to meet with hundreds of people. Where's the book? Where's the book? And we couldn't find one. So as it turns out, I've always loved to write. So I was keeping a blog. I was keeping track of all these little things that were happening to me. And I would keep track of what happened and how we dealt with them in the blog. I tried to be radiant every day. Tried to be radiant. And I'll tell you, sometimes it was a little hard. I often said to myself every morning, just be radiant. And sometimes being radiant meant, to me, just smile. Maybe that's all I can do for today. Other days, it meant putting on my wig, putting on all my makeup, getting up, getting dressed, going out on the town, or whatever I would do. By the way, I used to joke that I know why God takes your hair. It's to give you more time to do your makeup. Because it took a lot of makeup, let me tell you. So I did try to be radiant. And I tried to be radiant because I was seeing the others who were with me, who were visiting me. And I was seeing the sadness, and I was seeing the pain, and I was seeing the fear. And I wanted to be able to offer them something that would allow them to smile. And I knew that God was in me. And I knew that somewhere deep inside there was, I hoped, a beautiful person who was still there, even though everything else seemed to change. And I just wanted to share that every day. So that was my mantra. Be radiant today, Donna. Just smile when somebody walks in the door. And sometimes that's what it was. So as I started pulling all the blogs together to create the book, I realized that in the introduction, it just wasn't hanging together. The introduction was not working at all. And I have a spiritual advisor, and she said, you know, Donna, you haven't talked about faith yet. Well, remember, we don't talk about faith. That's not what I do. That's not where I came from. Not going to write about it either. And she goes, you need a paragraph in your introduction about faith. So I work on it. I think that one paragraph took longer than the entire book, I just have to say. Well, that's not quite true, but it's close. But you know, when it was done, it made sense. It held together. The introduction was correct. So I finished the introduction, and she looks in and she goes, that's great. How's the chapter coming? There is no chapter on faith. She goes, Donna, there has to be a chapter on faith. There has to be. And she's right. She's right. Because faith was in the middle of everything that was happening to me. And I knew that. I just had to be brave enough to share that. I remember the story of, I ordered a pizza, and the pizza guy came, and usually I had a wig right at the front door so that as somebody came, I could just throw it on and not look so sick. Wigs are what I used. And I just didn't feel good enough. I just didn't even throw the wig on. And he looked at me and he said, what's wrong? He said, well, it's breast cancer. And he goes, oh my heavens, I'm going to pray for you. And we finished, paying the bill, and he looked at me, he goes, no, seriously, I'm going to pray for you all the way to my next delivery. That happened all the time. People were right there, and they were praying, and they were caring, and they were loving, and I was seeing that. I was present to that. I was present to the people. I was present to their struggles. I was present to God, and he was there in shining glory. But as I got busy, I got scared. And right, yeah. Get busy again. We'd go back into our little dark hole, right? And we're not going to talk about faith. No, we're not going to write about faith. And we didn't eventually finish the chapter on faith with a lot of prodding from my spiritual director. And that chapter is called Beautifully Radiant, Your Inner Beauty. And what's so interesting about that chapter is that's the chapter that most people ask me about, the chapter on faith. Since we're here and I know we're faith-filled, I thought I'd read, I've got it written here, just 2 little paragraphs from that part of the book, if you will. I wrote, I'm Catholic. I grew up Catholic, attended Catholic schools, and try always to practice my faith. But never did I feel closer to God than when I had cancer. It was so odd. Going through cancer and the multiple surgeries, I could have intellectually made the case for being angry and blaming God. But that isn't what I felt. I was calm. I had inner peace. I had my faith. And never was it stronger. They say you find God when you are silent. I know there's nothing harder for me in my everyday non-cancer fighting life than being silent and listening to God. I think part of why my faith was so strong during the cancer is that I had no choice. I was sick, and I listened. The book came out, and not too long after that, it was named an International Book Award finalist. Who knew? I haven't been that excited about stickers since I was 5. I get to put little stickers on my book. It's like, that's so huge. As we saw the increasing sales, people said, oh, Donna, you have to start speaking about your faith. What did I say? Oh, heavens, there's no way. I can't speak about God. God's been dragging me along, kicking and screaming the entire time, except when I was too injured or too sick to kick and scream. Guess what I'm always speaking about? We know, faith. So you might want to know what happened in terms of the rest of the story. So I took the job, and I worked the entire time I went through cancer. At one point, I was in and out of the hospital quite a bit, but at one point I was in the hospital for about 5 days, so I'm talking to my boss in Brussels, and she's like, well, what do you have? Why are you in the hospital? Now, mind you, I'd been dealing with the cancer for about 5 months at this point, and my response to her was, well, it appears I have cancer. Who says that? It appears I have cancer. She's like, and we're not more upset about it? I'm like, no, we're just going to be okay with it. But I'd been dealing with it for a while, right? I kept working in corporate for about 3 years after my diagnosis. The diagnosis, by the way, was 7 years, 2 months, and 23 days ago. Not that I'm keeping track. So I kept working for 3 years. And the oncologist calls, and she says, you know, I'm a little concerned. We have never gotten your cancer markers back to normal since you had the cancer. It's one of two things. It's either the cancer is still here, in which case we're going to have to treat you again and figure this out, or it's stress. She said, I'm going to invite you to leave your job. And I heard that, and I put it into context because, you know, several years earlier, I'd heard, it's your career or your leg. This time I'm hearing it's your career or your life. Make the choice. And so I left. I left corporate America, and that was terrifying because I know how to do corporate America, and I know how to be busy all the time, right? But I left corporate America, and I started doing just more contract work, trying to speak more, write more. Interestingly enough, within 3 months of leaving corporate America, my cancer markers went to normal. They have never been up since. Wow. There's something about stress. So I finished my book, launched a book. It came out about 3 years ago, and trying to build a following, trying to do all the things we do as authors. But life unfolds, and one speech led to another, and it led to the meeting of a dear friend. And she was at a speech, and she heard me speak, and she said, you don't get it. You got to do this more. You got to share this story more. You're not alone in what happened. And so, with Jane's encouragement, we have been working on sort of a brand. And the brand is not just Donna Heckler, but it is Be Radiant. Because that is what this is about. Regardless of where we are in our journey, we can let God's inner light shine through us. We can share that. We can reflect God's radiance in each other. There's something so powerful to that. Something so life-giving when we're willing to share. I find it sort of interesting that as I reflect on this, maybe this has been my mantra all through my life. My mother reminds me that when I was 3, my nickname was Susie Sunshine. And I said, why? And she goes, you were just always nice. You were just always kind. You were just always smiling. You just were always looking out for others. Somehow, my radiance has ebbed and flowed through my life. It really ebbed when I was in corporate America. It was really hard to be who I was and share that authentically in that environment. And so as I step away from that, and as I try and reach people and connect with people and share God's love and God's light with others, I don't find myself in the darkness anymore. I see the light that is the God-given light. So while I still do brand marketing projects for companies at time, my life really is about writing and speaking. It's what I love to do. I'm working on a few different books. Working on a book called Be Radiant. Thank you, Laura. Working on another book called From Corporate to Contemplative. Because I think that there's a dichotomy there. There's a reason that Jennifer and I were both at Monsanto and both very faith-filled and could never share faith. And I want to understand that, and I want to begin to explore that, and I want to share that. I continue, of course, to write and speak on cancer. Cancer touches so many different people. But when I look at all of this, I think, God did give me a timeout. He gave me a first timeout to help me see the world around me to see the flowers, to see the various shades of green, to see the things that were in my own backyard. But he gave me another time out because I hadn't seen the people. And I see people now. I used to speak in corporate all the time. You know, we might have several hundred people. And I would always look over their heads. I just wouldn't see the faces. Hopefully you realize that I've seen each and every one of you here today, right? And when I speak, I see you. I see when you smile. I see when something has touched you. And I think that's what matters. It's seeing and being with each other and sharing radiance with each other. I think that God wants me to use my skills in marketing to share that message with others. And so, as I sort of wrap up my more prepared marks, I wanted to invite you to take your own time out. I wanted to invite you to look at the flowers in your own backyard, to notice the colors of the leaves as you drive back home, to really look at the person next to you. Look in their eyes. Look and see how beautifully radiant they are. During this crazy busy time, I mean, Halloween is in 3 days, and we have Thanksgiving, and Christmas is like tomorrow, right? Here's what I'd offer you, I would invite you, in fact, I think God invites you to take a time out for God. Thank you.